So today, Kasoma Farouk of Uganda is navigating the deep waters into the Russian Revolution of 1917. So we believe by this time, the Russian revolutions were violent reactions by the people of Russia against the conservatism and despotism of the Tsarist regime in Russia. The revolutions were two in one, i.e. one in February or March and the other one in October or November 1917. The one in February or March 1917 overthrew Nicholas II and therefore led to the collapse of Nicholas in Russia. What followed was the establishment of the provisional government of the Mensheviks led by Vov and Kerensky. The one of October or November led to the collapse of the provisional government and brought in the Bolsheviks under the leadership of Lenin. So by this time we are challenging minds. What caused the Russian Revolution of 1917? Number one, the despotic and harsh nature of Nicholas II. We believe by this time that Nicholas II's regime was despotic and harsh. Was despotic and what? Harsh. Nicholas was not willing to listen to the wishes of the people. It is said the year 1917, the Russians rose up in large numbers because Nicholas was not listening to the wishes of the what? Of the people. And by this time, they rose up and staged a revolution. Because they wanted equality before the law, Nicholas was not promoting equality before the what? Before the law. So it is this that led to the Russian revolutions of 1917. Then the rise of the revolutionary parties like the Bolsheviks. It is said, let me first explain. The Bolsheviks by this time mobilized the people. The Bolsheviks mobilized what? People. As the Bolsheviks mobilized the people against Nicholas the what? The second. In other words, they convinced the people that in 1917 they had to rise up against Nicholas. What's all about this? I can say in this kind of arrangement, the Bolsheviks were great mobilizers. They convinced the Russians that they must rise up against Nicholas the what? The second. Of course, the Russians had their voices and they supported the revolutions of 1917. Then the negative effects of industrialization. It is said industrialization couldn't be bad, but it brought negative what? Effects. For example, poor pay, congestion, and by this time, people moved from villages to towns to get employment opportunities because of industrialization. But in the towns, the jobs were not enough. The jobs were not what? Enough. Those who did not get jobs, those who had poor pay, by this time they had to rise up and stage a what? A revolution. So we are saying the negative effects of industrialization, which brought poor pay, congestion, rural-urban migration, led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Then the weaknesses of Nicholas II. It is said Nicholas II accepted to rule under the influence of the wife, Tsarina Alexandria, who poorly advised him. It is said Tsarina poorly advised Nicholas II. As Tsarina poorly advised Nicholas II, it is this that led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Because the Russians were not willing to accept Tsarina. Another one, the negative influence of Tsarina Alexandria. It is said she was the wife of Nicholas, but she was very conservative. As a result, she always poorly advised Nicholas to introduce reforms that she poorly advised Nicholas, and Nicholas failed to bring out reforms, which reforms could have made people to support him. So we are saying the negative influence of Tsarina Alexandria. Tsarina Alexandria poorly advised Nicholas, and it is this that led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Then the influence of Rasputin. The influence of Rasputin. Yes, you can write the influence of Rasputin. Rasputin. The influence of Rasputin. Rasputin. The influence of Rasputin. It is said Rasputin was a mad monk who poorly advised Nicholas II, and he was unsympathetic to the suffering of people. And what? Sympathetic to the suffering of the what? Of the people. So it is this that annoyed the Russians. They rose up in large numbers and staged a what? A revolution. Then the effects of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. The Russo-Japanese War was between Russia and Japan over territory called Manchuria. It is said in this war, Japan defeated Russia. As Japan defeated Russia, people blamed Nicholas for their defeat. They blamed Nicholas for their what? Their defeat. And by this time they rose up against Nicholas. And it is this that influenced the Russian Revolution of 1917. Then the Russian policy of Russification. We believe by this time, the Russian policy of Russification. This was a policy brought by Nicholas, where he told all foreigners in Russia to behave as Russians. You were meant to eat as Russians. You were supposed to move as Russians. This annoyed the foreigners. What the foreigners did, they supported the revolution in where? In Russia. And this led to the Russian revolutions of 1917. Then the land problem. It is said most of the land was owned by a few people. Other people did not have land. The peasants did not have land. It is this that made the peasants to rise up in large numbers. And they had to stage a what? A revolution. Because they wanted to be given land. But land was in the hands of very few what? People. Then the negative effects of World War I. We believe by this time the negative effects of World War I. You remember Russia was on the side of Triple Entente. But it is said Russia lost over 4 million people in World War I. It is this that annoyed the Russians, claiming that Nicholas took Russia to fight in World War I and their people were killed. And it is this that made them to rise up against Nicholas. And this led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Then the role of Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. It is said Lenin was a magnetic speaker in politics. He convinced the people that it was only the right time to rise up against Nicholas II. He was a great mobilizer in politics, and by this time, he mobilized the people. And it is this that made many people to join the struggle, which led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Then the influence of the revolutionary ideologies from Western Europe. We believe by this time the Western ideologies from Western Europe, like the French Revolution of 1789, brought liberty, equality, and fraternity. These ideas influenced the Russians to rise up. They were saying, as the French succeeded, even as we are going to do what? To succeed. And it is this that led to the Russian Revolution of 1917. Another one, the weaknesses of the Russian parliament. It is said the Russian parliament called Duma, was full of weaknesses, where it failed to promote the wishes of the people. It is this that annoyed the people in Russia, because the Russian parliament was so much influenced by Nicholas II. It is this that led to the Russian Revolution of 1917, because masses were not willing to accept such a parliament. Then the inadequate political and economic reforms introduced by Alexander II. It is said Alexander II, who was there before the rise of Nicholas, introduced inadequate reforms like Edict of Emancipation of 1861, so as to liberate the peasants to liberate the peasants and get land. But it is